International Human Rights in Context by Henry J. Steiner and Philip Alston is an influential text in the field of human rights studies. The book provides a comprehensive overview of international human rights law, delving into the historical, political, and legal frameworks that shape the protection of human rights worldwide. It is often used as a core text for students and professionals interested in understanding the complexities of human rights in both theory and practice. Henry J. Steiner is a prominent professor of international law, specializing in human rights, while Philip Alston is a leading scholar in international law and human rights, having served as a special rapporteur for the United Nations. Both authors bring extensive academic and practical experience to the subject, making this book a crucial resource for understanding the development and implementation of human rights in a global context. The structure of the book. The text is structured to provide a thorough examination of international human rights law, from its philosophical underpinnings to its practical application in various contexts. The book is divided into several key parts, each exploring different aspects of human rights. 1. Historical and theoretical foundations. This section delves into the philosophical, political, and historical development of human rights. The authors explore the evolution of human rights from natural law theory in the Enlightenment period to the post-World War II development of international human rights law. Steiner and Alston discuss key thinkers and political movements that have contributed to the concept of universal human rights, highlighting the ways in which global events, particularly the atrocities of war, have shaped human rights discourse. International human rights law. One of the central parts of the book is devoted to the legal frameworks that govern human rights on an international scale. The authors examine key international treaties, conventions, and declarations, such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, UDHR, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, ICSCR. They explore the role of international organizations such as the United Nations and regional human rights bodies in the enforcement and protection of human rights standards. Number 3. Human rights and state sovereignty. A major theme of the book is the tension between human rights protection and state sovereignty. Steiner and Alston examine the challenges of enforcing human rights on a global scale, given the principle of state sovereignty that underlies the international system. They discuss the limitations of international human rights law, particularly when states refuse to comply with international norms or when human rights abuses occur within their borders. This section also addresses the role of non-governmental organizations, NGOs, civil society, and international human rights advocates in pressing for change, often in the face of government resistance. The role of the United Nations and other institutions. The United Nations, UN, plays a pivotal role in the promotion and protection of human rights. The book explores the various mechanisms within the UN system, including the Human Rights Council, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, OHCHR, and various UN human rights treaty bodies. The authors analyze the successes and failures of the UN in addressing human rights issues and the challenges of political dynamics that often undermine effective action. They also examine other international institutions, such as the International Criminal Court, ICC, and regional human rights courts, in their efforts to hold perpetrators of human rights violations accountable. 5. Economic, social, and cultural rights. While much of the early human rights movement focused on civil and political rights, there has been growing recognition of the importance of economic, social, and cultural rights, ESC rights. Steiner and Alston examine the evolution of ESC rights within international law, discussing their status and the difficulties in realizing these rights globally. They highlight the ongoing debates about the justiciability of ESC rights and the role of international institutions in addressing issues such as poverty, education, healthcare, and labor rights. 6. Human rights and globalization. The authors address the impact of globalization on human rights. They explore the ways in which economic globalization, international trade, and transnational corporations can both support and undermine human rights. The book discusses issues such as labor rights, the exploitation of workers in developing countries, and the human rights implications of global supply chains. Steiner and Alston also highlight the increasing importance of international human rights law in addressing global challenges like environmental degradation, climate change, and migration. 7. Contemporary human rights issues. The final section of the book deals with pressing contemporary human rights issues, such as the protection of refugees and displaced persons, the fight against torture and other forms of ill treatment, the rights of women and children, and the struggle for racial and ethnic equality. The authors explore the legal and practical challenges of addressing these issues, often in the context of ongoing armed conflicts, political oppression, and the rise of authoritarian regimes. Key themes and ideas. Universality of human rights. One of the central themes of international human rights in context is the universality of human rights. Steiner and Alston argue that human rights should apply to all individuals, regardless of their nationality, race, gender, or religion. They discuss the challenges to this universality, including cultural relativism and the resistance of some states to international human rights norms. The authors emphasize the importance of building a global consensus on the fundamental rights that should be afforded to all people. State sovereignty versus human rights protection. Another recurring theme is the tension between state sovereignty and the protection of human rights. The book highlights the difficulty of enforcing human rights norms when states prioritize their sovereignty and resist international scrutiny. The authors discuss the role of international law and institutions in overcoming these challenges while acknowledging the limitations of the international system. Human rights as a political tool. Steiner and Alston also explore the ways in which human rights can be used as a political tool. States and other actors may promote human rights in some contexts, while ignoring or violating them in others. The authors examine the politicization of human rights, particularly in the context of international relations and diplomacy, where human rights concerns may be sidelined in favor of economic, strategic, or geopolitical interests. Economic and social rights. The book argues for a broader understanding of human rights that includes not only civil and political rights, but also economic, social, and cultural rights. Steiner and Alston critique the historical prioritization of civil and political rights, emphasizing the importance of addressing issues like poverty, education, and health in human rights discourse. Globalization and human rights. Finally, the book explores the impact of globalization on human rights. The authors discuss how economic globalization can exacerbate inequalities and human rights violations, particularly in developing countries, and they examine the role of transnational corporations in shaping human rights outcomes. International Human Rights in Context is an essential resource for anyone seeking to understand the complexities of international human rights law. Steiner and Alston provide a thorough examination of the history, theory, and practice of human rights, highlighting both the achievements and challenges of the international human rights system. The book's comprehensive approach makes it a vital text for students, scholars, and practitioners in the field of human rights, offering both theoretical insights and practical perspectives on the protection and promotion of human rights in the modern world.